Hi, my name's Sonia and this is my channel, See It Then, See It Now. Today's video is a make it from scratch and I've not done one of these for a while. All I used was cardboard, glue, clay, paint and filler. Let's take a look, see how I went on. The first thing I needed to do was to decide how big I wanted to cut the pieces of cardboard. I wanted it to look like two books stacked on top of each other, but not neatly, like at a bit of an angle like they'd just been dropped on the table. At first I thought I'd just make it look like two books on the outside but one big box on the inside, because the problem was that the tissues they wouldn't fit into the thickness of just one book, and I didn't want the books to look ridiculously chunky, so I was struggling on how I was going to get this to work. So after quite a lot of deliberation, I had a flash of inspiration, or maybe a cheat, because it did really simplify the process, you decide, was to keep the two books as full books that both opened. That way the top book could have the oval opening and as it could hold as many tissues as would fit, and the bottom book could store the extras ready to refill the top once they were needed. Honestly, I'm not quite sure what took more brain power, coming up with that plan or trying to explain it in this voiceover so that you'd have an inkling of an idea of what I was talking about. Anyway, with that decided, I started cutting all the pieces of cardboard. Each book needed a top, a bottom, a spine and 8 side pieces because I doubled up the card on the side to make it stronger. If you're still with me at this point, congratulations. It's going to make more sense once it all starts coming together. I'm already thinking maybe I'll pop a little diagram on the screen and pop the measurements up there too. Becky, can we magic that up please? Once everything was cut, I started on the pages, basically the sides of the book boxes. I covered 3 of the pieces with filler, 3 for each book, with the filler, and scored lines through it with a feather wire tool just to make it look a bit like pages of a book. The filler was a little bit messy, but it was very easy to do and I set them to one side to dry. Next came the outer covers. I taped the back, the front and the spine pieces together with masking tape. I measured the inside and marked where the sides would sit, and I then covered the whole outside with a layer of tissue. I did the same for the second book, but this one had the oval opening for the tissues. I taped around the oval and covered the outside in the same way. I then wanted to add some texture to the covers. I mixed some of the filler I'd used on the pages and got some white and some blue paint. I'll leave the exact paint colours in the description box, and I started experimenting. I smoothed some of the areas with a palette knife and dabbed others with tissue to get a different texture. I kept some of the areas more blue and some more white. I liked the effect, I really did, but honestly I wasn't sure about the blue at first. Would it go with the other decor? I decided to go with it for now and see what happens, and if you're a regular to my channel you know where this is going, I'm sure you do. I also added filler to the inside edges of the book up to where the pages would sit. Next, I painted the pages with a mix of buff and white acrylic paint, and then I moved on to the inside of the books. I printed a design from the Graphics Fairy. They have so many beautiful free printables. I will leave the link in the description box. I cut the pieces to fit all the areas inside the books, the cover, the spine, the inner walls, and then I glued them all in place. Once I'd glued the printer paper to the 4 side pieces of card, I then glued each of those to the filler covered card pieces. So one side had the texture that would be the outside of the book with the pages, and the other had the printer paper on, which would be the inside part of the book. They were a little bit stubborn and didn't want to stick together perfectly. The filler one was a bit bent, it didn't want to sit straight, so I did have to weight these down with basically whatever I could find in my craft room and let them to dry. Once everything was dry, it was time to assemble the boxes, and the first couple of attempts didn't work. Everything just kept falling apart, but eventually I did figure out a system that worked. I'll be honest, I was getting so frustrated with this I nearly just gave up on the whole thing. First of all, I glued the sides together with hot glue. That worked fairly okay. The problem came when I needed to glue these side pieces to the bottom of the book. I added filler along the top edge to cover any joins and smooth out any edges, and at this point I'd already tried a few different things to try and glue this square to the bottom of the book, and I was really struggling. I tried several glues, nothing seemed to want to stick, it just kept coming loose, and I was getting a bit like I say, I nearly gave up. And then I thought, what if I put loads of filler around the bottom and then stuck that to the bottom of the book? And I'll be honest, I didn't think it would work, but it really did. It worked very well. It did squidge out. I did have to wipe and clean up the edges, but it did actually work really well. It stuck really well and didn't come apart anymore, so that was a win. Once the filler was dry, I went over any of the new filler where it had squidged through, where it had stained the pages. Along that top edge, I just gave it all a coat of the white and buff paint that I'd used on the sides at the beginning. The books were now secure, but the bottom edges on the inside looked a bit messy from the filler cleanup, so I decided to cover it with string. I plaited some string and then glued it around the bottom edges inside. Next, I glued the inside spine to the back side of the box. The books had opened fine without me doing this, but they kept springing open, so I glued them with E6000 and hot glue. It did make opening the book a little bit more restricted, but that's fine, it just needs to open enough to put the tissues in, and it did solve the problem of the book springing open. Now came the fun part, decorating. I got out the Das clay and started playing with the moulds. On the top book I used a beautiful Fairy on the Moon mould for the oval, and I glued this in place in the bottom left side. I popped the cardboard back over the hole just to support the clay that was hanging over the edges, just until the clay dried. On the bottom book I decorated the spine, adding mouldings across the width. I then rolled out some clay, stamped some words into it and added it along the span with a slightly tatty edge and folding it over. I loved how this looked and I glued it in place with wood glue. On the top book I added more words, flowers and a border around the oval. Basically I just played around with the clay until I was happy with the design. I don't have the footage of the spine decoration that I did for the top book. I had to wait until all this dried before I did it, and I don't know what I did. I don't know where it's gone. But you'll see what I did with that when I start painting. I was still not happy with this blue, so I painted it darker. And spoiler alert, I'm not going to be happy with this darker blue either. I started painting all the clay moulds and making it look really pretty. I preferred the darker blue, but there was something about this that I was still not happy with. And it got put to one side and I ignored it for a while, and then I would look at it and pretend that it was okay and that I was happy with it. Then other days I'd look at it and think, no, I'm really not happy with it, but I couldn't work out what the problem was. And I think what the problem was, and I've said this to one of my lovely viewers, shout out to you Susie if you're watching this, that I'm just fed up with blue. I think I've done that much. The guest bedroom has been such a big project and there's a lot of blue in there, and I think I'm just ready for really mixing up the colours and changing and just doing something that's not blue. I don't know, but I wasn't happy with it, so I decided to paint it grey, and I love it. I love the grey. I mixed some white in there as well, and it just looks so much better. To me, it looks so much better grey, so I'm really glad I made that decision. Now all that was left to do was to glue the two books together, and I used PVA glue. Let's have a reminder and see it then. And let's see it now. That's it, 2 books, 1 tissue box, and proof of what happens if I'm left unsupervised with cardboard. I absolutely love how this turned out, but let me know in the comments what you think. If you enjoyed this video and would like to see more of the kind of things I get up to, upcycles and other bits similar to this, then do like and subscribe. You can also follow me on Facebook and Instagram. I will leave a list of the products that I used in the description box. And all that's left for me to say is thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you very soon in the next one. Bye for now.